The thick canopy of trees overhead made the night feel heavier than usual. Save for a few glimpses of moonlight that peeked through the leaves and branches, the forest was dark. The only thing that interrupted the stillness was the sound of the group's footsteps as they carefully made their way through the woods. After walking for some time, the adventurers noticed the gloom around them slowly giving way to a soft glow. Ahead of them, Trina could see floating orbs of iridescent light. As the shadows retreated from her face, the halfling couldn't help but break out into a wide grin.
Finally, after weeks of busting our arses, we can have a bit of fun.
This welcomed recess had happened entirely by accident. They had heard a scream during a routine guard detail for a fabric merchant. Following the cry for help to its source, the adventurers had found a purple-skinned elf being set upon by a small raiding party of goblin riders, waving their spears menacingly as they sat atop their warg mounts. After the greenskins and wargs had been taken care of, the elf, who identified herself as Holy Ifu, offered her saviors her thanks and a small purse of coins. To the rest of the party's dismay, Ukushaza had politely declined the reward, citing his satisfaction as a shepherd of nature and knowing that he had helped one of the forest folk as payment enough. Upon learning that the turtle was a fellow druid, the elf invited them all to a festival celebrating Sinelos Kor that would be held deep inside of a forest glade. "Ah, shield meat!" Sprezio exclaimed. "Hard to believe it's almost been 4 years since the last one."
You mean Boone's Day? The day after Midsummer? I remember celebrating with my folks back at our village. Partially remember, anyway. Had quite a bit of ale that night,
Trina said, with a giggle. As the cluster of trees suddenly opened up, Trina was struck by just how much space there was in this clearing. What was more was the number of creatures who were milling about in it. Elves wearing subtle, yet beautiful tunics and cloaks that seemed to flow and flutter like falling leaves in a nighttime breeze. A few scattered humans and halflings, looking as out of place as her own companions. Assorted woodland creatures that scurried across branches in the forest floor, seemingly unbothered by the activity around them. Or, perhaps, drawn to it? Ukushaza smiled and raised a hand. Trina turned and saw Holy Ifu striding towards them, a soft smile adorning her face. She and Ukushaza joined hands and bowed their heads slightly.
Ravan Raventhas,
the elf said. Sister and friend of the forest, Ukushaza replied. Holy Ifu raised her head.
I'm happy you could make it,
she said.
This night is always an unforgettable one.
The sound of low horns blared from the woods just beyond the edge of the glade. A creature with the torso of a well-muscled man and the body and legs of a large horse emerged from the trees. As he trotted forward, blowing another long blast from the curved ram's horn he held to his lips, a group of similar creatures followed behind him. Look at all those centaurs, Sprezio said. Look at all those muscles, Britomar remarked, her mouth slightly agape.
The guests of honor have arrived,
their elf companion replied, excitedly clasping her hands together.
I thought we were supposed to be the guests of honor,
Trina whispered to Ukushaza. The wizened turtle patted her head and chuckled. Even the most familiar stars sometimes form shapes we don't expect, little one. Trina frowned in confusion as she quickly untussled her hair. As the centaurs stopped in the center of the clearing, one strode out beyond the others. His features were much more hard-worn than the rest, and his silver hair was pulled back in a long and dignified braid. Most of his upper body was covered by a cloak that was embossed with motifs of glittering constellations.
That's the tribe's Starseer. My Sylvan pronunciation is, well, not the best, but in our tongue, his name means gazes to the heavens,
Holy Ifu said.
He reads the omens and signs from the night sky and interprets them for guidance. A great honor, as many centaurs don't reach old age. Not alongside the rest of their tribe, anyway.
Another elf walked out to meet the elder centaur, her steps long and light, yet elegantly unhurried. Though her countenance was far from elderly, her eyes were filled with the wisdom of centuries. Her flowing white hair almost seemed to shine as it reflected the light from the heavens and from around the glade.
Ivelath, Aravan Amathiel.
Holy Ifu said reverently. As the white-haired elf approached, the silver-maned centaur stooped to a knee in a low bow. The elf stopped walking and returned the gesture. After a moment, they both looked up at each other, broad smiles spreading across their faces. The centaur opened his arms wide as the elf walked to him and met his embrace.
The relationship between our clan and the Stormhoof tribe goes back decades.
Holy Ifu explained.
Those two have been friends for ages.
Iveloth turned to address the people gathered in the clearing, a stream of strong, clear Elvish flying from her lips.
Our honored guests, the Stormhoofs, have arrived.
Holy Ifu translated.
To honor Corlon Laurenthian and Solanor Thalendira, let our celebration begin.
The air filled with joyous sound as the gathered elves and centaurs erupted into cheers. The energy of the glade changed in an instant as the quiet hum of anticipation swelled to an electric buzz of excitement. People laid out blankets on the forest floor, producing refreshments from sacks and bags that were passed between gathered friends and family. The sound of music and laughter rose through the glade.
Come on, you mutton heads, let's get a spot,
Trina said excitedly.
Yes, it would be rude not to take part in such a joyous gathering,
Ukushaza replied, with a nod.
Hey, big sis, do you mind giving us a lift?
Britomar responded with an amused snort as she easily lifted the halfling onto her shoulder. Why don't you spy us some booze while you're up there?
No need to search. You are guests. Follow me.
Holy Ifu said, as she began nimbly making her way through the clusters of people. She led them to a large cart that held 3 massive oaken barrels attended by a dwarf. His shaggy mane was so long that Trina couldn't tell where the hair ended and the beard began. It suddenly dawned on the halfling that this was the only dwarf she had seen all evening. As each adventurer produced their tankard or drinking horn, the dwarf wordlessly took them and filled them from a tap on one of the barrels. The whole time he hummed and chuckled to himself, responding only with a nod when they had all been served. Trina took a sip and was immediately filled with a warmth that spread lazily through her body.
What was this stuff?
She wondered. It tasted like a sweet fruit wine, but had the fizzy body of an ale. Trina took another sip. Whatever it was one of the best things she had ever tasted. As the group walked through the throngs of elves, centaurs, and other assorted guests, the sound of hammers striking against wood mixed with the din of music and voices. Where's that coming from, Trina? I'm having a bit of trouble seeing anything outside of our immediate vicinity, Sprezio said, trying to peer around a group of centaurs that were walking in front of them. From her vantage point on Britomar's shoulders, Trina could see a small group of elves pounding large wooden stakes into the ground. Ropes were being suspended between them and secured to each stake, forming a large square.
They're building a fighting ring.
Of sorts.
Their elf companion replied.
The ring is for bouts of strength, which will be starting soon. No weapons, no magic, just one creature testing their might against another. Though anyone is welcome to enter, the victor is normally a Stormhoof.
Strength, you say? Britomar said. Can't say I've ever had the chance to knock a horseman on his ass before. Trina steadied herself as her friend rolled her shoulders in anticipation.
Well then, go enter. You 3 go on ahead. I'd like to borrow your companion to secure a spot before all the best ones are taken.
Ukushaza agreed with a nod, motioning his companions onward. Once explained, the rules for the bouts were simple. A competitor loses when they are forced from the ring or their back hits the ground. Striking opponents was against the rules, but any type of grapple or hold was permissible. Bouts went by relatively quickly. Centaurs slammed into and pinned each other. Elves employed complex and acrobatic holds that worked well against their 2-legged opponents, but proved ineffective against their powerful, equine-bodied foes. One particularly unlucky elf was hurled from the ring, which was met with cries from the crowd that turned to cheers when he indicated he was okay with a shaky thumbs up. Britomar grinned and gave the elf a wink as she was named the victor of that round. The final two competitors stood facing each other, a male centaur with a heavily scarred torso and a large mountain of a human woman.
Go get 'em, Fee!
Trina cheered, raising her small fist in the air. The centaur extended a hand, speaking to Britomar in a language that seemed to flow together like a running stream, punctuated with syllables as crisp as an autumn breeze. "Oi, mate, I've no idea what you're saying," Britomar said, shaking the outstretched hand. "But believe me, when I say I'm looking forward to putting my hands on you." As the competitors backed apart, Britomar unbuttoned her tunic and threw it out of the ring, where it landed squarely on Sprezio's face. Bare from the waist up, save for wraps of fabric around her mid-chest, Britomar lightly swung her arms and flexed her muscular shoulders as a sly smile spread across her face. Her opponent struck at the ground with his hooves impatiently. 2 low drum beats sounded. The match was on. Centaur and human charged forward, catching the other's hands as they crashed together. For a moment, they were evenly matched, as one tried to unsuccessfully shove the other. Then the centaur took a step forward, then another. Trina watched as Britomar strained against her opponent. Her boots made shallow grooves in the ground as she was slowly pushed backwards. "Come on, old girl, use that thick head of yours!" Sprezio called out. Britomar continued to resist for a moment, then quickly let go of the centaur's hands. As he took a step forward to steady himself, the centaur's expression changed from one of confidence to one of shock, as his opponent ducked down and grabbed him by the leg. Britomar placed a foot behind the centaur's hoof, then growled as she twisted and lifted upwards. The centaur toppled over with a crash, landing squarely on his back. The crowd roared as Britomar raised her fists and gave a triumphant shout. 3 drum beats sounded out. The match was won. As Trina jumped to her feet and applauded, she caught Sprezio looking at Britomar with a strangely sentimental look on his face.
"See something you like up there, Sprezio?" she asked.
While she couldn't tell on account of his skin's red hue, Trina was almost certain that the tiefling was blushing. Britomar was awarded a fine yet sturdy cloak for her victory. The elven quality was evident. The deep forest green fabric was tightly woven, yet felt light in the hand when Trina examined it. "Gold would have been nice, but my cloak was getting a few too many knife holes in it," Britomar mused, fiddling with the clasp as the trio walked. When they found their way back to Ukushaza and Holy Ifu, Trina couldn't help but laugh at what she saw. The turtle was surrounded by a small gaggle of elf children and centaur foals. He was sporting a crown of woven flowers, and his shell was covered in brightly colored paintings of stars and the moon. "Oh, my young ones, people will think you stole the lights from the night sky and placed them on my back," Ukushaza said, which elicited a chorus of delighted giggles from the chattering children. "Druid, medicine man, Pied Piper, what can't you do, old friend?" Sprezio chuckled.
Okay, young ones. We've had our fun, but now you must go back to your families. Shan, Shan.
Holy Ifu said with a smile. As the children scurried away, the purple-skinned elf turned to the adventurers.
I knew you were a capable bunch, but I wasn't aware that the well of your skills ran so deep.
She said, looking at the victor's cloak that Britomar was wearing.
I assume one of you will be competing to honor the celebration of Solinar Thirandira. On this night, the master archer wants only the finest displays of marksmanship.
"Ooh, an archery contest," Trina cooed. "Count me in. I can knock an acorn out of a squirrel's mouth mid-leap. Without hurting the little nibbler, of course," she added, with a slight shrug.
The fighting ring was quickly dismantled, the space reconfigured into an archery field. Targets were set up downrange at various intervals. Trina noticed that the targets farthest away were placed among the trees at the edge of the glade. The halfling took her place along the other challengers as the rules were proclaimed. Each competitor is allowed 2 shots per target. Only a hit to the center ring allows an archer to continue to the next round. Arrows would be provided to prevent any tricks or interference. Only bows were permitted. No crossbows allowed.
This is a test of skill, not a showcase for mechanical toys.
Holy Ifu translated, with a soft laugh. Trina rolled her eyes and accepted one of the provided short bows. As the halfling knocked one of the arrows from the quiver that was placed in front of her, she was impressed with how light it felt. She had to hand it to these elves. Their craftsmanship was flawless, even on such a simple thing as an arrow. Trina drew back the string of her bow and shot towards the target. Bullseye. As Trina expected, the fiercest competition came from the centaurs and elves. The grace of their draws was only surpassed by the pinpoint accuracy of their placement. But the halfling was able to match them shot for shot. Before Trina knew it, it was time for the last round of targets. She found herself in the final 3. Her remaining competitors were a beautiful female centaur with flowing brown hair tied back under an earth-colored scarf, and an elf with twisting vine tattoos that curled from his shoulder down to the wrist of his right arm. Trina focused on the target at the end of the range. She took a deep breath, drew back an arrow, then let it loose. Just then a slight breeze began to blow. The arrow sailed forward without an issue, but lodged itself in a limb that swayed lazily in the wind. A groan rose from the crowd. Trina's left eye twitched with frustration. "Stay calm. You've got this," she thought to herself, regaining her composure. The halfling watched the limb for a moment, studying how it moved in the wind. She took another breath to steady her aim. "Easy, easy," she thought, as she drew her second and final arrow. As the limb swayed out of the path between her and the target, Trina shot. The arrow flew forward perfectly, missing the limb and embedding itself in the third ring out from the center with a loud thud. Trina was furious. She felt her face get hot. Her eyes felt like they could pop right out of her head. She wanted to scream and break that stupid bow over her knee. Instead, all that came out was a slight, whoop! Bad luck, I guess. She tensed as she fought down the roar that was trying to escape from her chest. The tattooed elf was ultimately the victor, landing a perfectly placed shot to the center of the target that elicited an excited cheer from the crowd. He was awarded a beautifully crafted longbow that was carved with nature motifs interspersed with elven script. The female centaur was a close second, placing her arrow on the border between the center and first rings. She and Trina were each given a quiver of the same arrows that had been used in the competition. After receiving their awards, the centaur turned to the halfling and spoke to her in the same flowing language as her fellow tribemates.
Sorry, what's that you said?"
"She's complimenting you," replied the tattooed elf.
"Oh, well, that's very—"
Her exact words were, "A valiant effort, little one. It is a wonder that such a mighty spirit is able to fit inside such a small body." Trina ground her teeth together while keeping her face in a tense smile.
"That's very nice of you,"
she replied to the centaur, giving her a shallow, begrudging curtsy before quickly walking back to the party to drink her anger away. The rest of the night became a blur of music, dancing, laughter, and that strange but delicious ale, or wine, or whatever it was. The young halfling slowly forgot about her bitter defeat as she and the rest of the partygoers slowly wound down to rest. Later that night, Trina dreamed of being declared the best archer this side of Faerun, smiling and waving as she was lifted up by the cheering crowd. But suddenly, the hands loosened, and she tumbled hard to the ground. Trina was awoken by the feeling of the ground shuddering beneath her. There was a pause. Then it shuddered again. "What the?" she asked groggily. As the ground shook once more, the sound of horns blared. Shouts rose from the glade as the gathered guests grabbed for their weapons. Children and foals were quickly herded away into the trees.
Rouse yourselves, my friends. I believe we are in danger.
No sooner had the turtle finished speaking when a huge form crashed through the tree line. Clad only in a dirty loincloth, its tangled mess of hair blew back wildly as it bellowed in a harsh, grating language that shook the very ground beneath the halfling's feet. Trunks and limbs shattered and snapped as it took another step forward with a massive foot. Trina gasped, petrified. For a moment, she was aware of how very small she was in the shadow of this very big figure. It reached down and grabbed one of the large barrels from the ale cart. The huge creature raised the barrel to its mouth as casually as Trina would lift her tankard, guzzling it dry in seconds. It threw the empty barrel behind it into the trees as it reached down for another round. The massive brute quickly withdrew its hand with an angry bellow as a small storm of arrows flew into its palm. Groups of elves and centaurs formed into archer squads, preparing another volley. All of a sudden, they lowered their bows and hastily dispersed in various directions. A huge wooden club slammed into the ground where many of them had just been standing. As the gigantic brute raised its club to deal another blow, it reeled back as its chest was blasted with 3 bolts of fire. "That's your opening! Take it!" Sprezio shouted, his eyes still glowing red from channeling the weave. Britomar roared as she charged forward, swinging the Empress above her head. Ukushaza raised his gnarled staff towards the sky, which quickly filled with clouds. A bolt of lightning arced towards the imposing intruder, causing it to howl with pain. Trina knocked one of the elven arrows into her bow, drawing a bead on one of their towering foes' massive eyes as it regained its footing. As it raised its club for another swing, Trina sent an arrow whistling towards her target. Another howl shook the glade. Bullseye!
Thanks for joining us on Browsing the Bestiary. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes and check out our Patreon at Browsing the Bestiary, all one word.
There you can keep up to date on any new pod-related announcements, access reference pages for each episode, and download character sheets for characters featured in our story times. You can also comment on what you think the next monster will be, and if you get it right, you'll get inspiration.
And if you're something of a lore master yourself, you can offer us corrections for any facts we got wrong. If you catch something we missed, you may get a shout out in a future episode.
Remember to cite your sources.
I'm Dungeon Mistress Jade.
And I'm Lore Master Andy.
Until next time, may your dice rolls be high
and your adventurers ever prepared.
Oh! 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 All right, I think that's everything. If there's anything I missed, let me know. Over and out.